this computer. Yeah, so what I was getting at, and I want your thoughts on whether this makes any sense to you, that a lot of what is interesting about what I've done, they're not decisions that like I tossed and turned and wondered what to do and stuff. But from the very beginning, I had an idea of how to do something, right? And so, and I'm not sure, so it was kind of instinctual. And I'm not sure that my instincts like that are different from most people. So I think they might not be. And if those instincts that brought about those, instinctive decisions are common, then a lot of positive things could come from that. So like when I started the Banff classification, in the very first day, the very first meeting, I gave the first talk. It was my meeting, right? Mm-hmm. And I talk about, getting inspiration from the classical muses, and that Banff is such a beautiful place that they're more likely to find us here, and that it is so tiny and inaccessible relatively that there could never be a medical school here. No matter how long you wait, there'll never be a gigantic medical center in Banff.
Tiny one, maybe a tiny one.
It just would not happen. So therefore, it's kind of a touristy place accessible to everyone. And so you can think of it treats everybody in the world with an interest in transplant pathology equally. We can all come here and celebrate advances in this field, and it doesn't benefit like one group as opposed to another. Mm-hmm. Now, most medical standards begin entirely different from that. They begin with one person doing it and putting their name on it, right? And then other people get jealous and they put their name, and like the field never resolves on just one standard because that standard has this person's name on it. Nobody wants to like bow down to that person and so on. So the reason that the Banff classification has become the worldwide standard and has basically no competition is exactly that it was given that kind of neutral name that everybody can, embrace. And so that is not something that I hemmed and hawed and sort of said, well, I got to strategize here. What should I say about this? No, I mean, this was just my internal belief, wherever it came from, about how the world should work was like that, And so suppose that one could show that in fact most people have that, instinctive belief. Wouldn't that be great? And the same is true of the other 4 things that I listed there. And if you think about it from the other point of view, let's take the really complicated things that I've done where the genesis of it was one of these leaping from an idea in 2005 to something in 2012, and finally, and no one else would ever make those leaps, right? So how are we going to promote that kind of stuff? Okay, isn't it great that Kim did this? No one else would do this, because what does this have to do with this? Except Kim thought it had something to do with,
right?
He was making associations between things no one else would ever make. So
artists of the surreal.
Right. So Leonard Cohen was right. He is a great artist of the surreal, and therefore the things he's done do not have any big lessons for us because we can't do things like that because we don't think like that. Whereas if these, instinctive things are important, and if they're quite common, if most people have those instincts, if
Hmm.
I'm going to do something that's positively impacting the whole world, am I going to put my name on it, Kim Solez, or am I going to try to give it a neutral name? So I don't know what most people would think about that.
Hmm. Honestly, I think that it's probably common to like that gut feeling you talk about. I think it's probably common to everyone, but it's kind of like everyone has the same physiological system, but what do you do with it, right? Everyone
Right.
has fear, but some people have huge anxiety because they're really scared of everything, and some people are fearless, but even the most fearless person has some extent of fear. So I think that idea of having a gut feeling of what's right and having ideas is something that we all have, but some people it's a bit more suppressed, like the more
Yeah.
calculating
Yeah.
people, and other people have theirs. But your final results are probably different from most people because you attach your experiences and your thinking that others don't have to that gut feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right. But I think that it it gives us more of a common base to work from if we think that a lot of people might have the same instincts that I had about that. Now, about traveling with another person, I mean, it doesn't even need to be, a sort of binary gender world, right? It could be any sort of gender, including, sort of
I have a friend's
indeterminate.
friend who's gender fluid, and I don't
Yeah,
know anyone
yeah,
personally, but yeah, yeah.
yeah. So when two people are traveling together for a good scientific purpose and doing a lot of traveling, I think it is kind of instinctive that you would work out a way of completely equalizing the decision making, and so that it remains fun for both parties. So one person isn't worried, I wonder what he's gonna start hitting on me, or so whatever.
I mean, I
Um,
think, and I think that's the optimal result because I've gone traveling with very unpleasant people who took control freak
right, sure,
pause over the whole trip and made it much less fun for the others involved because that person was a control freak. So
right.
the optimization, and I think maybe
So, one thing working in our favor here, it may seem like a negative thing about the human race, but I think, male sperm counts are going down, probably average, testosterone
really
levels are going down. It really doesn't matter all that much, but men are becoming less sort of irritatingly macho, right? And
wait, wait, what's this?
the macho male fits in less, right? There are very
That's
few
true.
situations now where what the world really needs is a macho male to come in and sort of, knowing nothing, still pretend to have all the ideas about what we should do, right?
Right,
That's a skill that was useful in the past because getting the information was really hard.
right.
Now you always have the information you need. It may be a matter of sorting it or interpreting it, but having somebody forceful who has no better understanding of the situation than anyone else, but is just more assertive, and having that person take charge and lead you in a certain direction, even if it's exactly the wrong direction, that was semi-useful in past
Right.
centuries,
If you
but
needed a
not
direction.
not now, right? So I think that this is all sort of, it all fits in together. The idea of the super macho male just being completely dominant, um, it, just, I mean, in addition to a lot of other downsides, makes travel much less pleasant for basically everybody, right? Whereas if most groups of travelers have this kind of equality of, decision making going on, then it's just a much calmer, happier world, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
So yeah.
I
So
agree.
I'm thinking that could also be something where the basic instincts of most people is the same as what motivated me, that it's not like maybe it's a different outcome. Lorraine and I
Mhm.
did a lot of traveling together, and it had many positive effects, and it was very enjoyable. And so and it was interesting that it was characterized by two kinds of communication: ordinary auditory, audible communication, and then sort of wordless communication. So like we would have conversations sometimes that went on for an entire day, basically, and was really fun. Um, but there were also important things, like when we went to meetings, she would, in a way that I could never figure out, because she never called me about this when it was completely unnecessary. Like I would be feeling like I was just about to fall asleep. I had to moderate a session in 45 minutes, and the phone would ring. Would be Lorraine saying, "Hey, you have to moderate this session." So like it's it didn't happen when I was right on top of things, and it happened indeed when it was useful. She probably noticed I was sort of nodding the last time she saw me, and she could imagine me being a no-show or whatever. So that worked really, really well. And so there were other sort of wordless things between us that also kind of benefit the overall situation. Um, so then the third thing, the Tuesday night poetry, um, nothing bad ever happened. It's just that I realized what I really could not judge in that crowd. And it's funny because I was like 50 years older than everybody else, right? So my
Right.
mind is not thinking who's attracted to me. That's
Oh
not
no.
not what I'm thinking. But then when somebody asks me to take them home, I realize this is an issue. Why did they ask me to take them home? So I thought, well, I should just say no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And that was really the only problem. That way I really didn't have to worry about what ideas everybody in the room is having about me. I just assume that they're not having any ideas about me. That works fine, as long as I'm not taking them somewhere in the car. It's just me and them. So yeah, and it really was kind of eye opening in a lot of ways, and realizing that the sort of how much on the edge these young people were. Like about a fifth of the poetry had to do with uh, sexual assault, and a fifth of the poetry had to do with severe mental illness or suicidal thoughts. And in fact, what made it comfortable for me is that a lot of the poetry leaders in town had taken suicide prevention courses.
Right.
Who knew this is a thing that poets do? But it is. So they
It makes
actually,
sense, right?
yeah, yeah. So whereas I had more medical knowledge. They had actually more suicide prevention knowledge than I did. So I didn't have to think, well, gee, I'm the only physician here, you know. And the only person I knew who actually took their life did so um, at about 6 months after she had last been to poetry. So, I mean, she sort of
Hmm.
stopped going and then, you know, took her own life.
Oh dear.
Uh, and there was no sort of communication with us. There was no cries for help or anything. It isn't that you know we missed something. It's just she was sort of not coming, and then yeah.
That's
So
sad.
yeah, yeah, it was. But so that's a very it's like the poverty simulation exercise that I took with United Way, where in 2.5 hours I learned so much about life, about what it's like to be an impoverished person, what
Hmm.
kind of frustrations there are, what the challenges are. I'm very glad I did that. But the most eye-opening thing about it was I got back to the hospital, started talking about it, and most of the people around me thought I had committed such a colossal waste of time.
Really?
Because when they got into medical school, they decided they're never going to be impoverished. So they stopped worrying about poverty because it could
Hmm.
never affect them, right? Okay.
Right, right.
And so any moment, in their opinion, spent thinking about poverty is just completely stupid because, you know, impoverished people really don't count much in the world. And I was amazed. Anyway, I
No,
was
it's yeah, I think it's important these things and to
sure.
not lose track of what the other side of the coin can be when you're not in a place where things are good and you're not a physician and you're not in a in a happy family or a home and a background that's
Yeah. Yeah.
privileged. Hmm.
So yeah, I think every moment I spent in Tuesday night poetry, every moment I spent editing videos, sending them to these people, some of whom were actually homeless, had to go to
Hmm.
the library
Oh
to
wow, yeah,
check
that's
email.
poverty. That's
Wow.
poverty.
So
Wow.
so it's yeah. I mean, I my edited video of their poetry. It's like a real high point in their life, you
For
know.
sure, for
And
sure. Yeah, Kim.
yeah,
Doing good in all sorts of
yeah,
ways.
yeah. So,
Hmm.
so anyway, then the fourth thing is so like the video that Ashita and I did for Future Day, and then for this AI in healthcare student society thing on March 13th,
Hmm.
um, contains a lot of innovations, but very large scale, right? So
Right.
if you're going to say, okay, so there's going to be this new way of doing presentations where you use virtual Zoom backgrounds, you change those rather than changing slides. And it's kind of cool because you kind of have to get out of the way because you got words on your slide if you're there, people. So so it kind of changes the way you would do the presentation. You'd have fewer words and so on. Well, but do I own Zoom or something? No, no. I mean, I lack the intellectual property to make money on the idea, but I have unique knowledge that it would work
Right.
because the most successful presentation we ever had in the course only had 8 slides and very few words. That means, you know, if the dean of arts can do that, I think ultimately other people can also do that. Probably our slides do have too many words, and we're just repeating what we're already saying on the slides and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But that's I think it's a very good idea. It can make presentations better. It has a lot of advantages, but there's no way for me to make any money on it. And I don't I don't wish to. That wasn't the reason that I came up with the idea. And the other ideas are even bigger. I mean, take Peter Diamandis's challenged everybody taking, Singularity University courses or Abundance 360 to develop a massively transformative purpose. And what is that? It's something you could do that would positively benefit 1 billion people. Wow. But what I said is, why couldn't you do 8 billion people? Because there actually are 8 billion people. So why are you limiting it to 1 billion? Well, the reason's obvious, that if you're going to make a company and make money on this, you can't have it something that applies to absolutely everyone, because that's impossible. But if you're just going to reach people with the idea without actually making it practical in a granular way, okay, we're going to use narrow AI to solve climate change. Okay, well, where is this narrow AI going to be? How are you going to train it? So on. Yeah. And so once you remove the idea that you need to make money, then you can actually aim to impact 8 billion people. And you can, because people realize, Kim Solez says climate change can be fixed. It's just humans can't do it. So we need to get, sentient machines to help us here. Yeah, so, and if you're thinking that this is financially disadvantageous to us, it isn't. Because suppose we succeed at these two things, and we solve climate change and nuclear war. Don't you think people will come to us wanting other things? So I mean, then we become like the hottest commodity in town, right? So I think by not focusing on making money on these ideas now, we can have great benefit in the future.
Agreed.
Yeah. So anyway, and so what I thought was, the next step I would take with A to Z Ventures, it is simply say to them that we want to control the description of us, or the bio, or whatever, that the existing MOU sort of has two options. One is that on their website they would have information about us as some entity collaborating with them. But the other option listed is that they would link to something that we would control. And I think that that's obviously what we want, because that takes away all the risk, which isn't that great. But I mean, there is some risk. We don't know exactly what A to Z Ventures is going to end up doing, and so we don't want them to be able to control what the world thinks about us by text on their website. And then we will end up with a legally actionable, signable document. And I'm not going to sign it until you guys say that I should, right? So that doesn't mean anything's going to happen. If we don't like what that looks like, then we will not sign it. And it's still kind of interesting, because this interest by that venture capital firm has made us realize this is real. Yeah, we're something that's actually impacting this present reality. It's not just in our dreams or fantasies that we're impacting others. We're actually impacting others. And so if this legally actionable, signable thing that we get, if we don't like it, then we won't sign it. And if it's not modified, then we won't sign with this company, but we could sign with some other company. So are these ideas so far? Is it kind of working?
Yeah. I mean, for sure. A to Z Venture, from what I understand, is they themselves are starting up, so they want to appear like they have expertise and connections. So your credentials are definitely really helpful to them to have on their site description, you know. So I think in that aspect, they can get a lot from us. And yeah, I agree that it's good to know what we need and to not
Yeah.
let them walk over us either.
Yeah, so their website has existed since 2011. It is possible that there was another company by the same name that they sort of bought out, and that the previous website had nothing to do with them, and that indeed you're quite right. They're sort of just starting in 2020, 2021.
Well, regardless, whatever they're doing now is kind of new. I don't
Yeah,
know how
yeah, yeah,
in the long run if it's new, but
yeah. So that's fine, and so that's what I think I will do.
yeah.
And the Dwinell Homestead thing, we're actually at 7 o'clock your time, 5 o'clock my time this afternoon. We're having the next meeting. That's the most organized part of my family. I don't know why, but anyway, my maternal grandfather, Franklin Pierce Dwinell, was the only doctor in Bradford, Vermont, for about 40 years, and delivered all the babies, had a big wall of all the babies he had, delivered, and that sort of thing. And so his family has a homestead, a very nice looking building in East Calais, Vermont. And they have a sort of annual meeting, but now they're doing it more because of COVID and it being virtual. So anyway, that's kind of cool to have some idea of the background of our family, and to have an actual homestead. A lot of people know a kind of vague background, but you can't look at an actual building as this is the Dwinell homestead.
wow, yeah.
And it's a famous name. There were governors of Vermont by that name, and so on. So yeah. Anyway, it's kind of fun. So that's what I'm doing later this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, you could talk about their ideas about a certain stylized, I guess, family tree, or if they want to update the family tree or something, maybe it could be like a family project. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's right. I think I'll tell them about Molly Little and animation and all that kind of thing, and they'll already know that because they've seen the Instagram page, and will have seen the influence. So yeah, we could put Molly Little's talents on the family tree and make something quite pretty, I think. So
I agree. She's a very good artist.
yeah, so I'm going to stop recording now.